Chapter 19. Day 30. Tank. Uli understood the routine now. He got up, ate, performed some calisthenics for exercise, sat at the table, and began to code. He had reached intermediate level by day 7. Now he was in the advanced section. Each level was considered a different task, and he had been rewarded with credits. His latest programming challenges had gotten significantly harder. It was some sort of intercept that he was working on trying to decipher, but he couldn't quite get the formula down yet. The AI behind Revtar performed most of the heavy-duty coding. Uli simply provided some of the original thoughts needed to generate the bulk of the code. He had been on 29 walks, and they were his favorite part of the day, even though nothing really ever changed. The tube routes were different each time, but you couldn't tell by the surroundings. Uli glanced at the other prisoners using his peripherals and found that this was the reason he enjoyed his walks. How long had it been since he had spoken to another living being? He thought Khaldun had been remote, but this place took the cake for isolation. It was strange. He had everything he needed to live comfortably. He slept fine, and the food wasn't too bad. He even had a computer and something to keep his mind busy. Still, he found himself wishing for a traditional, lawless prison where the strong ruled the weak. Even though you felt fear and had to play the game, at least you felt something. And here you were a fucking robot, just like the cleaners. How many of these prisoners had lived the majority of their lives doing this bullshit, following the warden's routine, her regiment? Uli had looked for any means to escape, but had come up short. The walls of the tubes were unbreakable. He could tell that just by looking at them. Everything in here functioned on time and schedule. He had never seen a deviation. Day 100. Uli knew what was going on now. He was sure of it. He was programming code to fight the Sirax. This whole place, it was harnessing the human power to fight the war, many against their very own people. The prisoners were powerless to stop it. There was no possible way of escape. If you refused to do any work, the electrical shocks would eventually get you, but wouldn't kill you. Oh no, not even close. They would just cause you the greatest pain imaginable, over and over again, until you got back up and continued typing. He became an expert at watching people through his peripherals. He could see the desperate helplessness on their faces. Once the realization had sunk in that you had absolutely no control over anything, that nothing ever changed, nor would it, then you were in a bad place. Uli was in this bad place. Today was going to be the last day they used him to fight his own people. Today was the day he took back control. It had taken him a long time to figure out a plan. He was going to kill himself. The last decision he could make for himself. He searched for days for potential ways to do so, but found it was much harder than one would think. The bed had no sharp edges, no gap where it pushed in. There were no blankets, no towels. The waste removal cord didn't come out of the wall more than a few inches. The monitor was built into the wall, and the table was curved all the way around and wouldn't close if something was obstructing it. He had actually thought about crushing his head between the table and the wall, but after testing it out with a finger, he knew that plan wouldn't work. The tubes were out of the question too, being perfectly circular and rubbery. On day 77, he had seen another prisoner try to bash his head in on the walls of the tube, but his head just bounced off, and he was shocked nearly immediately. A robot cleaner came and carried him to his room. No, you had to be creative if you wanted to slip one by the warden. You had to factor in that they could shock you at any time to get you to stop. You had to play them. Uli glanced at the clock on his monitor. It was time for his walk. Just about now. The door opened, and he walked out and began his usual walkabout. But as the door began to close, he quickly ran back and jumped inside the room, disrobed, and threw one end of his uniform through the closing hatch. There was a hefty click as the door sealed shut. Uli quickly tugged on the clothing, to make sure it was snug and wouldn't budge. He had hoped that the clothing would be small enough not to stop the door from closing, and he was right. He then tied one of the legs around his neck. He had to do this quickly before they found out. Once he had the leg end tied firmly around his neck, he let himself fall. The clothing pulled tight, and he began to choke. Just then, a little cleaning robot came out of a hole in his room and began to clean, taking no notice of the prisoner dying right above it. Uli's eyes followed the little creature on its route, watching it polish the floor. Suddenly, there was an electric shock. They had found out. The shock crippled him, but Uli had planned for it. He went limp and continued to dangle on the clothing. Blackness slowly moved in around the corners of his vision. There was a slight hissing sound, and Uli fell to the ground, his chest smashing hard into the little robot cleaner. Air came back into his lungs, and he looked slowly around. The hatch had reopened. Shit. God damn it. I thought protocol didn't allow for 2 hatches to be opened in the same tube at the same time. I wasn't fast enough. What kind of place is this where a man can't even kill himself? God fucking damn it. I just want to be done. Is death too much to ask for? He felt his chest heave up and the little robot scurried away. One of its motor controls appeared to be broken, and it was spinning out of control. It rammed into the wall 3 times before finding its little porthole and disappearing within. Uli's hatch closed, his monitor came on, and a voice boomed in the room. Prisoner 9064, your walking privileges have been revoked for 1 week. Discontinue this nonsense at once. Tears streamed down the big Syrax face. This place owned him. He would never be free. He was losing his individuality, and there was nothing he could do about it. Continue your programming, prisoner 9064. He was about to get up when he felt a slight bump pressing against his stomach. Carefully, his arm moved underneath his body, and he grabbed some foreign object, something real, something new. He cautiously moved his closed fist up to his eyes and opened it ever so slightly, peering at the object. It was a bright green triangular chip. It must have come off the robot. Uli got up, put his robes back on, and went back to the computer. As he brought his hands near the keyboard, he kept the object tucked between his thumb and his palm. As per his usual routine, he began programming and typing in more code. He had gotten so good at typing after doing it for about 14 hours a day for the past 100 days that he never needed to look down. When he happened to glance down after about an hour of programming to make sure the object was out of sight, he spotted it. Another key. He paused for only a second before his fingers resumed typing, but his eyes were glued on the new key. He was sure it had never been there before. Experimentally, he reached his middle finger up and pressed it. A new terminal opened up. Uli had never seen such a thing before, never had access before. He looked down at the object in his hand. Uli kept coding his program, but began throwing experimental commands at the terminal. After a couple hours, he had an idea of what it was. It was the robot's programming routines, routes, and codes. He began to sort through the files available on the server, rummaging through the junk until at last he found the mother lode. A full blueprint schematic appeared, showing the complete and inner workings of the prison systems. Only now did he understand the true depth of this place. The tubing went everywhere. There must have been hundreds of miles of it. Even better, though, he could see the movement of all the robots in real time. Uli's heart was racing so fast, he had to compose himself for a few moments. He looked cautiously around, but there were no signs that the warden had caught on. This could change everything. Uli started analyzing the schematics. Day 107. 7 days. It had been 7 days since Uli had found the control chip. No one had noticed yet. He completed his usual work and followed his routine perfectly. But while he worked, he studied. There was a new vigor in the Sirac. He could code that nonsense bullshit the warden wanted him to with his eyes closed. He had a purpose now, motivation. Each day he studied the blueprints, and now he had his route and his plan memorized by heart. Escape by traditional means was impossible. This control piece, as it turned out, was an access card, but it could only get him so far. He wasn't able to open his hatch, or the main hatches to the facility. Even if he could, how would he get by the turrets? No, he was going down to the ground level. The facility had 3 main lines of electricity flowing into it. One came in from the surface, while 2 big power mains came from below the facility. That meant they drew power from the core. The 2 gigantic pipes that held the thick cables went straight from underground to the above ground without any stopping or breaking off, which meant there must have been a power plant up on the surface that regulated and controlled the electricity. The pipe that came back in from the surface must have come directly from that. Originally, he had considered going for the smaller power cable coming from the surface, but it was so far away from where his cell was, he figured it would take him a full day of walking to even be remotely close, and getting that far unobserved would be hard. He was fairly sure his access card would work on the tube doors, allowing him to take his planned route down to the 2 lower power cables. Those were, by comparison, a mere 20 minutes from his cell. There were a lot of what-ifs to deal with, but he didn't have anything to lose. The electrical shocks, however, were one thing that needed to be solved right away. For that, he had an idea. In all his time spent here, he had been forced to learn how to penetrate and breach firewalls for use on Federation enemies, he figured. With access to a backdoor terminal, however, he might be able to use those skills for some real good. Willie watched the clock tick on the monitor. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There was a click, and his hatch swung open for the first time since his failed suicide attempt. His fingers blazed along the keyboard, pouring in commands to the terminal. Since it was an AI-backed system, he wouldn't be able to breach it for long. If he was lucky, he would get in for a minute or 2. That was all he needed. A few minutes passed by. The hatch remained open. Bam! The firewall caved. As quick as he could, he loaded up the prisoner manifests. 20 seconds passed. Let's see, prisoner 9064. Where are you listed? Where are you? There. He found his number in the list and opened his profile. 40 seconds passed. Willie found what he was looking for. Implant ID. How about we change a few characters? He saved the changes and covered his tracks. Just as he was searching for any power overrides or damage that he could do from there, the system locked up. His monitor froze for a few seconds. Finally, the warden's voice spat out. What have you done? Lie down on the ground immediately. The hatch started to close. Uli's blood was pounding. This was it. He dashed across the room and jumped through the narrow opening. He rolled into the tube and came up running. The lights were still following him below. His pre-programmed walking route had worked. Uli laughed for a second, then came to the first tube door. This was it. He held the access chip to the tube, and the door shifted. He walked forward into the unplanned tube. His guiding lights stood in their place on the old route. The Sirac smiled and ran. He bolted this way and that, trying to keep his bearing the best he could in this rat maze. In a far-off cell, prisoner 2118 writhed in pain from an incessant electrical shock. He hadn't the faintest idea why, either. One of the tubes Uli turned into had another prisoner in it, walking away from him. Uli ran up and brushed past him. The guy fell to the ground. His stunned face and body was one that Uli would never forget. Hey, nice day, ain't it? Uli shouted behind to the prisoner. He realized that this was his first person-to-person interaction in almost 4 months. Uli had gone down 42 levels and hadn't encountered any resistance. There were a few more confused prisoners, and twice he hopped over the cleaning robots, who took no notice of him. Then he saw it. It was the flick of color at first that drew his attention to it. 6 levels above, a man in a pitch-black uniform was running. In his arms was a large weapon, which Uli recognized to be a hyperblaster. The Sirak ran faster, descending the tubes and navigating them like a mouse running from fire. No matter how fast or how many turns Uli made, the gap between the pursuers stayed constant. He had made it to the 15th level now. He could see the ground floor, actually see it. The pursuer was 4 levels away. On the 5th level, Uli had a long, straight stretch in front of him. The pursuer was only 1 level away now, and on a parallel tube. Uli sprinted down the straightaway, already completely out of breath. He hadn't done this much exercise in a long, long time. As he was running, he saw the pursuer stop up ahead of him. All of a sudden, orange burst sailed into his tube and melted through the plastic like butter. It was right in front of Uli. He stopped running. The pursuer's weapon clicked, and he jacked in another cartridge of cells and led a trail from behind the escaped prisoner. Uli ran forward and jumped out of the melted tube and into the air. He landed on another tube and slid off slowly, his back taking the brunt of the next tube. His staggered fall ended on a hard, concrete surface. Luckily, the fall from the lowest level tube had not been too high, but even so, Uli couldn't move his legs. He knew they were paralyzed. After a few minutes, the pursuer emerged from a hole on the bottom level tube and approached the Sirak, his hyperblaster trained on the body. Target acquired, the male spoke into an unseen communicator. Read the prisoner number to confirm, replied a voice. 9064. That's the one. Is he dead? The pursuer fired a shot into the prisoner's ankle, which severed his foot from his leg. There was no movement. Yeah, he's dead. Took a long fall. Good. Bring him back to the observatory. We need to inspect this one. Figure out what the hell happened. The pursuer stepped over the prisoner and the chunks of plastic debris from the tube. He took a long look up and counted at least 3 splat marks on the tube, maybe a 4th, but he couldn't be sure. As he squinted at one of the other prisoners who was looking down at them, a large, jagged chunk of plastic was driven through his knee. The soldier dropped his hyperblaster, and it fell into Uli's waiting arms. There was a single discharge. Uli pushed the lifeless soldier off of him, his neck contorted in the completely wrong direction. The Sirak looked at his wounded leg, which was pouring out blood. His vision was poor and seemed kind of fuzzy. He looked around for a bit, then spotted the pipes that held the main power supply. With a grunt, he grabbed the hyperblaster, and using one arm, he pushed himself into clear view of them. If I can't make it out of here, he breathed heavily, then maybe someone else will. Or maybe, at the very least, these prisoners will feel some sort of freedom, even if it's only temporary. He knew very well they could probably get another power system, at least a temporary one, delivered in a day. It didn't matter, though. He smiled and wished he had a cigar as he lifted the heavy hyperblaster in front of him. Uli Mandriggs pulled the trigger, feeling the power of radioactive energy slugs discharge. The tan barrel continued to spin even after all the cells had been expended. The Sirak threw it aside and stared at the damage. The pipes were severed. Sparks were showering out of one. He could see molten cables and a clear gap between the two ends. Yet the lights were still on. Nothing had changed. He looked around frantically. The colors were fading out of his vision, and he was feeling lightheaded. Uli calmed down, turned to face up towards the ceiling. At least I tried, he muttered. At least I tried. And he gave his last breath.